There we go.
Got it. There we go. Wow. Thank you, Celio. That was lovely. Oh, I love how you just disappeared. That was incredible. It's like you're using the force over there. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really flattered, and I find it a great honor because there's so much about my practice and the things that I do that are sort of peripherally or directly involved with the history of photography, and it's something that I play with and happily manipulate with abandon frequently. So you may find some of the things that I do a little bit counter historical, but it's all in the same aim to sort of explore this thing we call photography. So my point is that I'm really appreciate the audience that I've got here tonight, because there's a lot of things that I talk about in my practice that a lot of times, when I give talks to general audiences, they're not really necessarily aware of all the kinds of references that I'm making, and the sort of the depth of the esoteric knowledge that I draw from, that I don't necessarily have myself, but I'm aware of anyway. So anyway, long beginning to say thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. In a second, I'll pull up my sort of PowerPoint presentation and just go through a lot of different projects that I've worked on. And as Celio mentioned, I am a multidisciplinary artist who primarily works with photographic technologies and photography, but I am loath to call myself a photographer because I don't just take pictures, and I think most photographers would probably say that as well. So there's kind of a broad range of various different projects that I'll show you and talk about, and I'll kind of just go a bit all over the place because that's the easiest way for me to sort of talk about this stuff. So and I'll use the images that I compiled here to sort of trigger me to go on. So and please, as we're going through, please don't hesitate to stop and ask me any questions, and please refer to me as Andrew. Celio will not stop calling me Professor Wright, and I think he does that just because it's kind of funny in a way.
Remember, yeah. Professor Wright is never wrong.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, just please call me Andrew. Please have maybe I'm not sure how. Maybe there's an emoji or something that can pop up if you want to interrupt and ask a question. No, that's no trouble at all. So here we go. So I'm hitting share, and I hope that will come up. There we go. So can we see that?
Yes.
Okay. Beautiful, beautiful.
So I never know where to start with my projects because, a lot of times when artists talk about work, there's a very clear chronology of the way things go. I'm always working on a number of different things at the same time and come back to them and all in and out. So I'm not really sure precisely when these things happen, but basically there's some time in the last 20 years. I often start with this project because this, in some ways, is kind of representative of at least the kind of approach that I take to photographic work. So this is both a photograph and a sculpture, and this is where the image, the information in the image is directly, in some ways, contradicted by the information that you're presented with sculpturally. So what you're seeing visually in terms of the photograph is a weir, like sort of a low-lying dam, and water falling over towards you and down kind of in a sort of a convex way towards you, but yet as they're presented on these sort of big kind of pillar-like objects, they're concave. So the image information contradicts directly the sort of object or the presence information. And I always kind of move back and forth between presenting imagery as object or object as imagery. You're trying to sort of like tease out, I guess, the differences or kind of the contradiction between the sort of, I guess, imagistic imperative, or what we think about is like the imagistic imperative of what a photograph is. We're always thinking about the picture. And I'm lately particularly, and you'll see this in subsequent projects, I'm thinking a lot about how do you make a photograph without depiction? And what is it about photography or a photograph itself that is so distinctive and interesting if it's not just about picturing or depictive practices? So this is kind of a way of playing with that. I'm trying to press my next slide and it's not letting me do it. I guess I'll have to do it like this. Okay. So here's another example of this where the photographic images become dimensional. And in fact, the photographic information here is very sparse, very spare. This is a piece called Knox Borealis. By the way, so that piece is called Stillwater. And this is a piece called Knox Borealis, which effectively means Arctic nights. And so these were shot in the Arctics, just north of Iqaluit on Baffin Island. And so what you see at the top are just images, sort of landscapes of snow upside down, because one sense of orientation up in northern climes is completely confused or mixed up. You never really know where you are, what direction you're looking. And I went to the Arctic a number of times to sort of try and get a sense of that experience of that profound sort of visual and other kinds of disorientation. And so these become, as you can see over here, I don't know if you can see my cursor moving around.
Yes.
Okay. So these are large 5 by 9 foot panels of laminated plywood that are bent and vacuum formed. And then the photograph is placed on top of them. And in truth, you can see that if you look very carefully, you can see there's a bit of a seam right there. This part up here is the only photographic portion of this actual object. The rest of it, believe it or not, is actually kitchen countertop. And it was one of these moments where I noticed that the black of the paper that I was using at the time, the color photographic paper, look, I couldn't distinguish it between various high density laminates, which is kitchen countertops. So I decided that I could just use high density laminate as an object to be at the same time a pictorial space that shows nothing at the same time, like shows emptiness. And so this is 2 incarnations of the same piece. So it functions as a wall mounted piece, and also they can be sort of stacked up against each other in the gallery to become sculptural, and you can relate to them that way walking around. So are they image? Are they object? Neither and both, ultimately. In fact, one of them is just sheer black, but rubbed up or at least seen in the context adjacent to one of the others, you can still read that black surface as pictorial space. So it's kind of illusionistic in a way as well. I'm going to go fairly quickly because I've got a lot of images, and since talking with Sheila this afternoon, I've added a bunch more, so I'll just go fairly quickly. I've been doing a series of photographs at night with high-powered flash for a long time, since probably at least 20 years actually, and the idea here being that I wanted to sort of bring the aesthetic of the indoor photographic studio to the outdoor world, because it sort of encourages us, or maybe even forces us, to look at spaces that are lit in ways that we're not used to seeing them. The aesthetic of the indoor photographic studio is very well established, particularly when it comes to product photography and portrait photography. The conventions are in some ways almost sacrosanct at this point. So I wanted to bring some of those sort of basic lighting conventions and apply them to a subject that isn't normally treated in that way. And so these are become a series of, they're called Illuminated Landscapes. These 2 particular ones are shot in Georgian Bay. One of them on the left is on an island called American Camp Island near Go Home Bay. And they generally get titled as the subject of tree, the species of tree that they are. So on the right, this is Eastern White Pines, number something or other. I'm not sure which number it is, but they're both shot from a small rowboat, and then right sort of at water's edge. And this same kind of aesthetic I bring to other locations as well. So this is something called Boulder number 3. And this is shot also on Baffin Island. And the idea being originally that to bring this kind of the sense of this artificial photographic lighting to something that is so unabashedly natural or like unquestionably natural might sort of bring some kind of slight suspicion into the sort of the veracity or the realism of the photograph, because I mean that's what, you know, we assume so much that photography brings so much of that veracity to every situation, and it does so unquestioningly. But in this case, everything becomes quite flattened. You get sort of deep shadows that, you know, almost turn this into a stage set. It could be quite literally a cutout from an opera, perhaps. But yet there's nothing staged here at all. And just by sheer placement of the light, a single flash actually on the ground off to the side, as opposed to at camera height, we really, it's just somehow, you know, I hope gives a slightly otherworldly sense, or an indoor worldly sense to the scenario. So it's not really ostensibly about photographing nature per se, although there is a good deal of that in what I've done and what I do. But it's more about attempting to reveal the kind of perhaps questionable underpinnings of what we think photography brings us. This is a series of images called Untitled Photographic Pictures. And sometimes I make work just because someone else has made something and I'm like, yeah, that's not so important. I could do better than that. I'm not sure that I have, but I actually shot these after seeing a Stan Douglas show at the Ryerson Image Center a few years ago, where he had sort of staged a number of 1950s kind of scenarios and hired a photographer to shoot them in sort of a 1950s stylist, like documentary stylistic kind of street photography approach, and done really beautifully and really effectively. And I kind of thought, well, you know, like I really love that idea of photographic idioms and shooting in an idiomatic way. So, and I'm kind of in love with sort of antique lenses and the way that antique lenses and antique technologies made images that looked a particular way that we can't easily reproduce today. I mean, like the sort of conceit of cameras today is that everything's kind of perfect. You know, there's, you know, full range of tone and a full range of color and, you know, endless or extremely shallow depth of field, but it's all very, and it's all consistent across the entire picture plane. But in antique photography, just like some of the daguerreotypes that Clint was showing us just before we got started, like there's no consistency throughout. Like things wobble and change, and there's I guess I have this idea that this kind of perhaps a slightly more truthful way of looking at the world, because you know, our eyes don't have endless depth of field. So so on the way back from seeing this exhibition, I decided that I was going to try and sort of emulate this kind of historic idiom from the back of a train. And so I shot I don't know, a bunch of images. Oops, something happened there. And instead of sort of trying to stop action, what I did was just shoot these with really slow shutter speeds and try and match my movement as I was shooting to the same speed of the train. So I spent, I don't know, how long is it, 4.5 hours to get back from Toronto to Ottawa, doing this on the back of a train. And I think people thought I kind of went a little bit nuts. But what it means is that you get different parts of the photograph. It's not just about shift, tilt, or tilt shifting stuff. You get different parts that are in focus, different parts that are out of depth of field. You get motion blur at the same time. So it's kind of a really kind of technical photographer's kind of puzzle in a way. And I really love it when photographers look at this image and they're like, I can't quite figure out how you did this, especially when I tell them like there's no digital manipulation at all, even though these were shot in a digital camera. So this is the kind of images. So again, these are called Untitled Photographic Pictures because they're more about the technique and the strategy and the kind of stylistic atmosphere that ends up being rendered than any particular recording of, you know, tree or place or yeah, that kind of thing. This is a series of work called Corona, which had nothing to do with the virus. I shot these. Well, I didn't actually shoot them. That's the interesting thing, I guess, about them. These are images that are made by piercing 35 millimeter slide film with like a jeweler's drill bit, like a pinhole drill bit, basically, and then just leaving these to expose the whole canister to expose in the sun for, I don't know, an hour or something like that. And my hope or my intent was to try and collapse the idea of on the one hand, you have the apparatus that takes the picture and the lens that allows the light to come through, and then somehow you end up getting a picture that's separate from that thing, and the image is also separate from those things. So my hope was to try and collapse the operations, all those operations, into one. So make the film canister both the thing that records the image, that allows the light to come through, and becomes the end picture. So these are just, as I said, like I'm drilling through all the successive layers of 35 millimeter film, and then because they're slide film, simply having them developed, and then rephotographing them with a bunch of extension tubes, basically extreme macro, and making pictures of what is effectively I mean, the hole there is literally the thinner than a pinhole. So these are sort of macro or microscopic images, but yet they refer to the macroscopic at the same time. So they become kind of these sort of like amalgams of cosmology or astronomical kind of bodies, or a phenomena that we don't really understand where they come from. So they are photographs of exactly what they are. They're photographs of both how they were made and what they represent. They're pictures of a hole made by a hole, and that hole is the same hole. So yeah. And then they're printed quite large, so that they end up being quite big. Mm-hmm. Here's another photograph from the Illuminated Landscapes series. This one's called After Friedrich, referencing Caspar David Friedrich, sort of the German romantic expressionist painter from the late 19th century. And this is, again, sort of where the subject partially becomes the photographic apparatus itself. So I'm really interested in the ways that you can turn photography inside out, or collapse it down and make it self-reflexive. And the subject, again, is not ostensibly here nature, although it has that reference of Friedrich's paintings of the natural world, the culmination of the sublime of the natural world. But yet, really, the subject is simply this flash, or the light that emanates from the flash that's just pointed straight up and not really illuminated anything per se. I took 3 or 4 trips to the Arctic over, I guess, about 10 years ago, and tried to turn things upside down or right side up. I'm never really sure what was going on. So I'm blanking on the name of this piece right now. Oh, this is after Kurlik. The idea, Kurlik being the Canadian sort of prairie-based Ukrainian Canadian landscape sort of genre painter, who used snow as kind of a quiet sort of but ever-present character in his scenes. It's always kind of the foil, and very much in the way that Giotto would use landscape as foil for character things happening in front. But in this case, there's no people here. So this is a big snow wave, essentially, that was caused by wind. And again, scale is indeterminate here. It may appear big, it may appear small, but in actual fact, it took my friend and I about half an hour to walk from this point here all the way up to the top of this edge here. So it's quite immense, and it's recombined in this kind of false panorama. And if you look closely, you'll see that the image is actually doubled. So this part is the same as this part, but we read it quite readily as a panorama. And I do this quite a lot. I like the idea of being able to sort of put things on top of each other or separate them and state them twice, but yet in our, like as we look, we sort of read it immediately and understand it as one particular thing, but then we realize that maybe it's not that thing. And this is what the, again, what the promise and failure of photography that I find all the time. It's always ever referring to itself, but never really doing a good job of that, while it's, promising that it's going to refer to something else with faithfulness and veracity and truthfulness, and but it also fails at that repeatedly. And so I think a lot of my work actually is about like how much I love and photography, but yeah, how much it just disappoints me all the time. This is a work called Tree Corrections. And this is shot in Georgian Bay. Thanks for the, there is a lot of humor in my work, I hope. So it's always nice to hear somebody chuckling. Yeah. So yeah, what these are, Georgian Bay, of course, people may know that the prevailing winds there cause a lot of the trees to grow crooked, essentially. And so I've just corrected them photographically. Each tree, whether it's living or not, sort of essentially receives the same treatment. And they are all photographed too around the areas where the group of 7 painted. So there's, so that historical reference again to the history of painting and the desire for picturesque landscape. And so I'm kind of, in some ways, restating that desire, but also throwing a wrench into the works and kind of saying, well, wait a second, something's not quite right here. And it's actually remarkable when you're looking at them that they actually work both ways. Like you're actually, I've watched people look at the piece, they're turning their heads, and a lot of people spend half their time with their head crooked and being quite happy doing that, and then move it back straight. They're quite happy doing that too. And I sort of have the same experience of these. So it's quite a strange thing that we can be perceiving two kinds of, or operating in two modalities at the same time, kind of in a willful act of cognitive dissonance, or visual cognitive dissonance, so that's even a thing. It is really crazy how some trees grow. The idea that trees are uniquely vertical is like just clearly not the case. So along with my interest to try and turn things inside out or reverse the terms, combined with my sort of interest in apparatus and the apparatus of photography itself, and my interest in cameras as not necessarily collectible items, but as sculptural objects that are kind of like objects of that have this whole kind of sort of esoteric formal knowledge, or at least knowledge in terms of like its sculptural form. I thought, what makes, in addition to what makes photography or photographs unique, different from other things, what makes cameras unique, and what is it that about analog photography particularly that is so mysterious? And it always comes down to me to silver, and the silver is the agent that acts, as we all know, in the sort of semi-precious metal, or precious metal, I guess, that does all the work for us, but we never get to see it. It's always happens in the dark. And so I began to sort of ruminate on the idea of what would it be like to turn a camera inside out. And so I started silvering cameras on the outside, and thereby permanently damaging them, making them inoperable. But yet they begin to operate in an entirely different way. And I think there's a kind of really interesting moment where the silver goes over the lens, that the thing that obscures the actual function of the camera turns it into a mirror, and allows you to perpetually see another kind of image, almost from the point of view of the camera itself, and almost kind of anthropomorphizing the camera. And these objects get placed into mirror boxes, or endless mirror boxes, so that you're looking at a visual system of which you're not a part. because you can only see stuff that's in the box. You can't even see your own reflection against the box when you're looking at it. And that doesn't happen very often in life. The act of looking always implicates, obviously, the person who's looking, but you're always looking at yourself looking in some way, shape, or form. You're always having an effect on the environment in which you're looking. But in this case, you're not, because you can't see anything except what's in the box. And so there's a kind of weird quiet that happens, like a visual quiet. And I've even been standing in the gallery beside these plinths and looking at this, and people have been on the other side of them, and they suddenly turn or pop up, and you're like, oh, you're not even aware that someone was there. It's like a kind of visual black hole or something, which is kind of a strange thing. This is called Twinned. Oh, this was a title of this I can't quite remember, but basically I think disused twin reflex camera, I think. Yeah, twin lens reflex camera. And this is disused twinned 35 millimeters cameras, and there's a a classic. Sorry, I'm not trying to do that on purpose. There's a K1000, Pentax K1000 bolted to an Olympus M1 or something, and without their lenses, and the two mirrors that are inside, the reflex mirrors inside, are also silvered on top. So it's kind of this double silvering, which in fact mars the surface because it's not a perfect mirror, which is kind of, I guess in some ways ironic. I don't know. I think I've got a close up of this one so you can kind of see the details in there. And they're not, I silver these, and it's called spray chroming, but it is actually silver that's precipitated out onto the surface. And I'm not entirely expert at it. You can see that there's kind of some sort of tarnish or burning in here, which I kind of, I love the idea that it's kind of burning in a way. It's accidental, but it's sort of like analog photographic in that way. When I was first learning how to do this, one of the people that I learned it from told me that well, if you want a perfect surface, then when you're silvering cameras, and then he kind of said, well, I guess there is no standard for silvering cameras, so you can do whatever the hell you want. Like I was saying how much I love that kind of that tarnish. So and then this is twin Kodak disused twin Kodak Brownie cameras. Magically, apparently floating above the surface of the plinth. There is a sort of a clear plexiglass stand under here, so it doesn't rest on the leatherette strap there. And there's actually two cameras here, but because they're essentially mirror images of each other, one upside down on top of the other, it has happened that people have confused what is a mirror image versus an actual object. I've actually taken the photographs of this and turned them into negatives. And apart from the plinth on the base, the white light area on the bottom, which turns black and negative, you can't really tell which one is which. And I think that's a lovely kind of photographic conundrum where we get so much information presented to us, yet we still are not necessarily able to sort out, what is it that we're seeing all the time, or we're always potentially being duped, which is one of the lovely things I love about photography, that it can be just a big lie all the time. And here's another work in that same vein, and this one is probably the biggest and most ambitious one that I've made, and this is more of a sort of deliberate kind of narrative scenario that's happening. This is called Disused Portrait Camera Considers Wedgwood Vase. And so you have a Polaroid Studio Express camera, which is one of the last commercially produced analog portrait cameras. I think they stopped making these in about 1984, somewhere around there. But I'm sure someone will correct me on that. Please do. So that's sort of the far end, sort of the end of analog camera history in a way. And on the other side, you have this small Jasperware vase made by Wedgwood, which is obviously Wedgwood is still in production today, but started in the mid 1700s, and by the late 1700s, Thomas and Josiah Wedgwood were experimenting with photographic glazes or light-sensitive glazes in their pottery, and it's one of the first instances, I'm sure many of you are aware, of sort of photographic technology, or at least photographic chemistry, being applied to, applied to anything. But in this case, some sort of commercial use of that, even before, obviously, before the word photography even happened. So in a way, this is kind of bookending the history of photography. And this camera with its two lenses looks on to this vase, which has this kind of Arcadian scene around the outside. And again, you can see the whole, the vase repeated in the so-called eyes of this camera. Sorry, should I look at the chat? I don't know if there's anything that.
No worries. When questions come up, we'll bring them up. There's great comments here. Trevor's lighting the chat on fire.
Okay. I already feel for Trevor being 14 weeks in lockdown. So this is a bit this is a completely different kind of set of work here, but there's always this kind of idea of reflexively looking at and using photography as, in a way, as a subject. This is a series of works called Dawson Looking Glass. So this is shot on the longest day of the year in Dawson City, which is so far north that during the night it's pretty much like day. This was about 10 p.m. actually. It took me I did this around town for about 3 hours, and it never really got dark. So you can see the long shadows. So it's kind of like, feels like late afternoon or maybe even early morning, but it's quite late at night. So famously called the midnight sun. Mm-hmm. And I just, in a kind of, it started out as a performance to try and sort of, I don't know, somehow deal with the kind of weirdness of having this frontier town, that the whole town is essentially kind of a historical artifact that Parks Canada desperately tries to maintain, but doesn't do such a good job because of various reasons, lack of funding, I'm presuming. And so I kind of, walking around the town, just kind of felt like I should be, you know, the Keystone Cops or Charlie Chaplin, walking around with a ladder, hitting people and just sort of stumbling through the kind of awkwardness of this profound anachronism way up north. And so I grabbed this mirror and asked a friend of mine to sort of just document me walking around with this mirror. And it eventually sort of just became a photographic suite. So you get kind of, you know, postcards in a way held up, the mirror, the landscape being shown itself, and repositioning of boats back into the water, or buildings or the water back onto the street. And so it's just a, you know, very simple in a way translation, but one that I think is strangely effective. And then you come across sometimes images like this, which is just, you know, as Celio mentioned this afternoon, one of those decisive moment images that are completely accidental. So this is a blind man walking with a cane, and you can see his pupilless eyes apparently looking at the camera, you know, with intent or something, with you know, there is a gaze there, even though he's not seeing anything. He's obviously responding to sound. And the reflection is not him in the mirror, it's his wife, companion, I don't know, as I'm walking by, not even really paying attention. And then the shadow, or the shadow of him, and the confluence of that exact point, the stick is somehow dark and light there. It's just, I don't know, it's just one of those images that that I just go back to as being like, not feeling I'm responsible for it, but just kind of marveling at it. because it's just such a kind of lucky occurrence. And I think this is kind of what I thought photography would be, or this is what we were supposed to do as photographers when I was much younger, like always be looking for moments like this. So, you know, it's I appreciate when it happens, but I'm not really looking for that kind of sense of photography anymore. I wanted to go to Wyoming, to Yellowstone National Park, because I wanted to photograph geysers at night using high-powered flash. I'd done a series of photographs at the base of my Niagara Falls in 2005, I guess, using high-powered flash. And again, I guess really to try and sort of push what I thought photography could do. The kind of complexity of water breaking up in the air and vapor and steam and all those kinds of things is something that really only a camera can have any hope of sort of representing. But it's still, you know, even with the cameras that we have today, it still doesn't really do the job, but yet it's still at the same time incredibly compelling. So this is so I wanted to go shoot geysers with high-powered flash, partly because I'd never seen it done before, and to this day I don't think I've seen any images of any geysers at night with high-powered flash. Mostly because I think it's very difficult to do, as I discovered. Not only do you need a lot of equipment and a lot of permissions and a lot of help from people like park rangers, but you need a lot of bear spray. We were walking along the boardwalk at one point in Yellowstone, right not too far from Old Faithful, which this image is of. And the rangers said, just hold on a sec, we got to let such and such go by. I can't remember, it was a name like Harriet or Bertha or something. And I was like, well, what is she doing out here? And he said, no, that's not a person. That's a sow. That's a grizzly. And so she went her merry way while we cowered and wait for her to go by with our hands on our bear spray the whole time. So anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but I ended up photographing a particular geyser called Sawmill Geyser. Since then, I mean, I photographed these in 2015, the fall of 2015. And about 4 months later, Sawmill Geyser stopped erupting. It had erupted every 2 to 4 hours since 1870. And then it just stopped. And it's not restarted since. These are potentially the last images of the geyser that exist. Certainly the last ones at night. And so they're, again, like images that I guess attempt to try and represent the kind of endless confounding detail and information, but at the same time, you know, fail miserably at doing that because they just simply can't relate what's going on there, and you're only getting it from one point of view as well. Not necessarily that, not to say that three-dimensional or, you know, VR kind of versions of this would make it any better. These images, you know, show you water in all states. So ice and steam and liquid and everything in between. So they're, you know, when you're using high-powered flash, you know, the shutter speeds that you're getting, the effective shutter speeds are extremely, extremely fast. And then not too long after that, I was asked to come and present that piece at the University of Westminster in London. And they wanted to put it on these 14 windows. So I think pretty sure this is the largest photograph I've ever produced, 14 feet high and 100 and some odd feet long, across the windows of this university. And it's still there, actually. It's the University of Westminster has a campus in, you know, sort of central London, but also in Harrow. So if you're in Harrow, you can go and see this. Although I think they've actually had to remove some of the lights, so it might not be so well lit anymore, but it's still there. Just found that out a couple weeks ago, actually. They were supposed to take it down, but. So while I was in Wyoming, and this is one of the most boring images you could ever see because it's just text, but I wanted to show you that this is the statute called, it's called the Data Trespass Statute. And it's a statute that, it's a law that was enacted in the state of Wyoming that defined what trespassing was. And it was a law to prevent the collection of resource data, so-called resource data, from the land. It's a 2-page law, not very long. And what it essentially said was that it was illegal to take soil samples, water samples, oil samples, or other forms of data from the environment if your intention is to then take that data and submit it to some sort of agency, municipal, federal, whatever, in order to prove that there was some sort of pollution or nefarious activity going on. And it was a law that was sponsored by the very powerful cattle ranching lobby and industry in Wyoming, because people were trespassing on their land to collect data, to say that there was too much E. coli in the rivers, which is true. And so instead of stopping the practices of polluting the river with all the cattle, they tried to stop people collecting evidence of the practices that were happening. But buried in the detail was, and I can't remember if it's this page or the previous page, was data. The collection of data was defined as soil samples, water samples, but also defined as photographs. So what they effectively did, whether they intended or not, they made outdoor photography illegal in Wyoming in 2015. And I had already planned to go there, and I was doing this, and to shoot the geysers. And as I was doing this, I came across this law, and I was like, "What the heck?" Now that's the sound that I heard, I'm sure. What the heck? How can you make outdoor photography illegal? So I decided that I would go, while I was there, I would shoot a bunch of essentially innocuous, perhaps even banal landscape photographs, and simply title them illegal photographs. And so that's what these are. And so you might think that there is some sort of environmental calamity happening here, but in fact, any kind of degradation that's happening is entirely natural. This is in Yellowstone Park, where sulfur comes out of the ground, bubbling up, and various forms of minerals and toxic substances that very quickly kill trees or change the landscape. But it's a constantly changing and evolving sort of scenario. So there's nothing really wrong about what we're seeing pictorially. The only thing that's potentially illegal is merely the title, or me naming them illegal photographs. And they do look quite bleak. And you can see in the background here, this is steam largely from the Firehole River, which is fed by the geysers up at the sort of the source, the head of the river, where Old Faithful is. And in fact, there's over 300 geysers just around the area of Old Faithful, and then there's a whole bunch of other geysers everywhere. Like the whole state, well, in fact, like all of Wyoming is a big caldera, which is basically one flat volcano. And if this ever blows, the planet is kind of doomed. Not kind of doomed, it is doomed if this explodes. And so what I did was to just shoot a number of again, as I say, like sort of fairly innocuous, straightforward, maybe kind of slightly documentarian style photographs of these of areas that are completely untouched. There's no kind of there's nothing happening here except for preservation. So I came back from Wyoming and mentioned this to a lawyer friend of mine, and he said, "Well, would you like to do something about this?" And I wasn't quite sure what he meant. Actually, this one, I'll just stop for a second. If you look closely in here, this is the only place where I suspect somebody might have been looking at what I was doing. This is someone in a car wearing not touristy stuff, just wearing like kind of a suit. And I thought, what's that person doing there? But in truth, there was probably nothing at all. They probably didn't care. Anyway, this friend of mine said, I'd like to do something about this. And I said, sure, what do you have in mind? And he said, yeah, well, I'm going to come to your studio in a couple of weeks with my articling students, and we're going to put you on trial for having potentially broken the data trespass law. And I said, okay. So we had this trial, which was a fascinating exercise. And I think my lawyer friend who's pictured here became the judge. This is my lawyer. I learned a lot about procedure at that point, and including I'm not really allowed to talk to my own lawyer, which was kind of interesting. I also learned that most court proceedings do not have a court-appointed sommelier, and wine is not generally part of the proceeding. But it was this night. It was actually quite enjoyable. But what we did was we videotaped the proceedings, and then I cut the video of that into kind of like well, my idea was that I was going to make an episode of Law and Order, but of course that was beyond the scope of what I could do and the expertise that we had. But what I did was cut it into a series of little sort of vignettes overlaid with kind of excerpts or snippets of some of the photographs, and the video became this kind of not quite a kangaroo court, but more of a kind of a procedural quagmire, that nothing really could be determined from the result of this trial. And I don't reveal what the verdict was at the end of the video either. So I'll just, I'm not sure how well it will, it'll play over Zoom, but we'll give it a try. I'll just play it for a couple of minutes to give you an idea. Most importantly is the voiceover that you hear, and you'll sort of get the sense that like the images that you're seeing are meant to be pixelated, like very pixelated, like they are reduced to essentially photographic data, you know, to correspond with the idea of that's the data that's being, the data trespass. So I'll just play that if that's okay.
I want to confirm in your minds that Wyoming is indeed progressive in three respects at least. The first is, as you all know, Wyoming granted women the right to vote in 1869. The second reason why we in this state are progressive is that Wyoming was the first state in the United States to elect a female governor. The third reason as to why Wyoming is progressive is that the law of the province of Ontario, Canada, applies in Wyoming, including to the construction or interpretation of Wyoming statutes, including the statute to which you, Mr. Wright, are charged. Now, at least two of those items are true.
You are the same Andrew Wright who took this photograph?
I am. For the record, what photograph are you talking about? Is that exhibit 1?
The photograph is entitled Data Trespass Illegal Photograph number 22, 2016. Is that correct, Mr. Wright? What prompted you to take this specific photograph, exhibit 1?
I found the solitary tree that looked like it had been the victim of some environmental calamity. Interesting.
What environmental calamity are you referring to that you see in that photograph?
Well, I think it's indeterminate. And that's precisely why I find it interesting.
If I recall correctly, and my recollection's not that great, The witness said that there was not air, soil, or dirt, but images.
Yes, Your Honor. You're right.
And what's your position on that?
The photograph in Exhibit 1 definitely shows images of air, soil, water. The permission must be obtained first for collecting specifically resource data.
Okay, and where are you in the statute? I just sort of can't read.
It would be, I can go back to section 1A, sub 2, sub B. Remember
1A1.
No, 2.
1A
2B.
Got it.
Yes, sir. So resource data can be defined statutorily as data relating to land or land use, including data relating to agriculture, geology, air, water.
You missed mineral.
Well, it's data relating to air, water, soil, and all those things.
Okay, so you're relying on the data part.
Yes, Your Honor.
And is your position that an image of air is air?
I think I'll stop it there. That's the best line, I think, in the whole thing. Is it your position that an image of air is air? And I love how, you know, the prosecuting lawyer was trying to say that the statute definitely says that, you know, you're not allowed to take images of air. It's like, well, how would you know? Yeah, so it became this kind of like procedural kind of mess, and just kind of this not entirely a joke, but at least something that is like you're not really sure what the point of the exercise becomes, and you still, at the end of the day, you're still left with an image which shows something. What is unclear, maybe. I'm just looking at the time. I don't want to go too far over. It's 9 o'clock now.
You're good. You're good, sir. We're a bunch of night owls. We're all good.
Okay. This is a project called The Photograph Suspended Tree. This was produced in the Korean city of Ulsan. And Ulsan is where the Hyundai Factory is. It's the largest shipping container port in the world. Every single Hyundai car that's built is built here, and then they're shipped all over the place. The city is essentially the factory. There's obviously a city that's grown up a bit around it as well, but it's the factory is its own city with schools and apartments and leisure activities in addition to obviously the factory. And they also have a forest that they manage. And so the tree was sourced from that forest. The crane is a Hyundai crane. And this is a shipping container, which is, you know, the sort of the hallmark, or at least the main constituent, I guess, of global commerce. But here it's sort of oriented into, or remade, refashioned into camera obscura that on the inside shows you the image of the tree right side up, apparently. And this is the, you know, when we learn about photography or we learn about the eye, we always see, like, I don't know how many times, I don't know why it's always a tree, but you always get a tree and you get the camera obscura and you see the image of the tree upside down on the wall. And so this, I've just flipped this around thinking, well, what would it be like to actually have an upside down tree appear on the inside of this thing? And it's, I guess it's a not so subtle comment also on the kind of the sort of the nature of global commercial photography and the industries, the image industries like Hollywood and others that are on the same scale ultimately now as the automobile industry in some ways. It was kind of incredible actually when we were getting the tree that there was a house right beside that part of the forest that was a shipping container house. Just like the coincidences were crazy. Also, what I was offered tea by the owners as I was waiting for the tree to come down, and they came out and you know that I don't speak Korean and no one spoke English, and they were they knew I had to get a tree. That was about it. I guess one of them had explained to the woman with the tea that I was Canadian, I came from Canada, and she was like, "Oh, Canada!" And she pulls out her phone and she shows me a picture of her son who had just graduated university at Queen's and in Kingston. And I'm looking at the picture, and he's standing right in front of my dad's office at Queen's. Because my dad was a prof at Queen's for many years, and it was his window that he was standing in front of. It was just like, what? That's kind of, I mean, that obviously has nothing to do with photography or my talk tonight, but it's just like one of those incredible coincidences that happened. So I've also actually produced this. Again, this is kind of a double or a false panorama of the tree. You can see that this part, I guess it's here, this ribbon here is the same as here. So it extends it and makes it bigger than it actually is. But yet, as we completely accept it as kind of a singular object. And that's just a sort of documentation of the tree close up, upside down. Get near the end here. I don't normally photograph people or portraits, or I'm not I haven't really operated in the traditions of street photography, with the possible exception of the Dawson Looking Glass piece. But I was in Beijing, and this is the Temple of Heaven, which is a well-known historical site, sort of right in the center of Beijing. And along the outside, there's these long colonnades, hallways, where people gather, generally pensioners, from what I can understand, gather to play cards and just sort of hang out. And so this is a panoramic photograph you can see across the top that consists of 10 images of just one section of one of these long hallways, where there was just a kind of, I don't know, it felt like being in a staged photograph, just being there. And so, in fact, the photograph looks like I staged it. And it's I don't know, when it's produced, it's over 60 feet long. There's exactly 88 people in it. Again, complete coincidence. 88 is an auspicious kind of number in Chinese numerology, meaning good luck, double happiness, that kind of thing. There's one child in it, again, a practically accidental reference to China's one-child policy. There's only one non-Asian person, is this person here, who appears to be in some sort of conflict or doing something. I don't know, something's going on. This person's very potentially upset at what's happening. I don't know what he's doing. He's wearing his shoe backwards. I don't know what's going on there. This guy has like 3 pairs of sunglasses. There's a weird kind of color scheme with shoes and a weird obsession with people's phones. Women seem to be either pensive or thoughtful, where men are kind of agitated or actively engaged in their game. There's just the clothing is exclusively Western. It is conceivable that all this, these are retired people who have worked in factories that have made these clothes. In fact, there's only one person that's wearing anything traditionally Chinese, and that's a pair of shoes. It's just a kind of weird kind of combination of narratives that are going on here, and so yeah, it's kind of I have trouble even talking about it, because I get so involved and enthralled by it in a way. There's a couple of details here that are kind of interesting. This woman who looks like she's, as if she's posing for me, but she hasn't. She's not. This guy over here is screaming at his, players, or his. Here's the single child who's wearing Hello Kitty shoes and Hello Kitty briefcase, and then has Hello Kitty on here as well. Over here is the gentleman who's wearing, sorry, I was jumping around a bit. He's the only one wearing traditional Chinese shoes. He also appears to have a skin disease called ventimiglia, I think it's called, which sort of emphasizes his mouth. This woman playing cards, her cards disappear because the pattern matches almost perfectly her shirt. It's a strange kind of confluence of things. So this is yeah, I don't know how much else to say about that, except that it's just kind of one of these photographs that you either come across or make that just kind of, again, kind of continues to intrigue you. And so here's a couple of comparisons, or a comparison. So there's a famous Jeff Wall photograph from 1989 called The Outburst. And, you know, I kind of see this as the same guy and the same people. Now they're playing cards. As opposed to, you know, and wearing all the garments that they might have made in this factory. Yeah.
It's got a real tapestry feel to it, though. Very medieval.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a long, it's not an accident that it's, you know, there's a reference there to Chinese scroll painting and that kind of format, you know, and it seemed almost as if life was being played out before me as I was there in the way that it would be photographed before. Like, in some ways it doesn't even need to be photographed for it to be like this. So yeah. And I am getting towards the end of what I'm going to show you today. This is another work from the Arctic that is a 17 image long panorama of Apex, which is a small little hamlet right next to Iqaluit on Baffin Island. Here's but 9 of the 17 images, kind of at each end. And these were installed in a really fascinating, well, call it a gallery, I guess, but it's really a bunch of display windows in one of the new LRT stations. I say new, it's been open for almost 2 years now, but in these sort of display case windows, just sort of below the Eaton Center, or what we used to call the Eaton Center, the Rideau Center.
It's in Ottawa.
It's in Ottawa, yeah.
Yeah.
So, in fact, there was only room for 11 panels, but even there's 17 in total. But I kind of love that because, you know, I just took out almost at random, you know, 5 of the panels, or I can't do math. That would be 6 of the panels. 6 of the panels, and but again, the panorama still sort of functions. It still works. It's still, you know, it doesn't. People don't seem to really miss that. There's a whole section of missing. It was really fascinating too because Ottawa has the highest population of Inuit living outside of Nunavut. And when we were installing this, I mean, people were from Nunavut, from Apex, from Iqaluit, were walking by and saying, "Oh, home!" You know, they were just like, they recognized it right away. And then some people even come up to me and say, "Oh, you know, such a lovely time of year, mid-May." And I'm like, and I'm like, you know, I had to think about when was it shot? Yeah, May 12th, this was shot. Yeah. So there was some information in there that they, you know, angle of sun, I don't know, like character, feel, air, I don't know, that they could recognize immediately. And it was, and the way it, you know, again, kind of coincidental, the way it was lit, it did feel like you were looking through windows as opposed to them being stuck in boxes. As images. And I also put Apex, it's called the it's called 45 something gallery because I don't know if you can see on this slide, but it says you are here, and it gives you the coordinates, the lat longitude coordinates of this spot. And so what I did was I put the name Apex, which, you know, is also a peak, and then added the coordinates of that spot, so that you're, again, comparing perhaps where you are as to where you're looking or what you're seeing. And this is the last piece I'll show. This is a complicated piece, which I'll try and simplify. It's a 3-screen, well, more than 3-screen, ideally, video piece that, oh God, how do I start this? It is so complicated. I found a record in a garage sale about 15 years ago. And it was a recording of music by a composer named George Fiala, who was a Ukrainian-Canadian composer who wrote a suite of music called the Kurlik Suite. And each of the movements in this suite were based on a single painting by William Kurlik. And I didn't have a record player, and it was factory sealed. It had never been opened, it had never been played. And the record was 40 years old. And so I started sort of imagining what the music would sound like, and then by extension, how it would look. Like what would the movie be that this soundtrack would accompany? So I don't know, somehow through, I guess, a lot of thinking and confusion, I decided that it would be, what I wanted to do was make the visuals for a soundtrack that I couldn't hear. So essentially make a film track for a sound as opposed to making a soundtrack for a film. And so I started to record or take video of the record, the box of records itself, as if they were Arctic landscapes, like I imagined William Kurlik's paintings to be, because I do know quite a few of them. And there was one up at the National Gallery for a long, long time that is, you know, sort of a prairie, northern prairie scene. And so I was filming the box of records as if I was flying over the Arctic in a way. And then I did that, and I slowly opened the box and peeled off the wrapping and slowly put the records, filming the whole time, pretending it wasn't records, but pretending I was flying over the Arctic. You know, visually pretending, I guess. Once I removed the record, I took it to one of the auditoria at the University of Ottawa, and we set up a whole bunch of microphones to make a multi-track dimensional recording of this stereo record that was recorded by the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra in 1984, I think it was. And so I recorded the sort of the virgin playing of that record. So it had never been played before. I recorded it once. Then I put it back in the box and sealed it up and put it into this container. And this is a vacuum box. And so somehow I had the idea that I needed to, you know, not change the record once it had been recorded, and somehow removing the air from the box would, you know, remove the sound, as it effectively does remove the sound, but it also would sort of kind of preserve that time, that historical moment where the recording was, when it was originally played. And so this box is present and just lit, and there's a pump that continually sort of, not continuously, but like every now and again, keeps removing the air, turns on in the gallery, while you get this 9-dimensional sound filling the whole gallery. Like, and it's so crazy accurate that you can walk to one place and it feels like you're standing right in front of the oboist, and then you can walk over here and it, you know, it feels like the violin's right there, and you can, you know, you go to the back and you can hear people coughing and shuffling, and you think they might be actual people. It's incredible the fidelity that you can get out of a stereo recording. You know, I'm not a vinyl aficionado or anything like that, but I was just kind of amazed at how effective and how full sound can create imagery. Effectively can create imagery. So I'm not sure how well this will work, but I just want to give you a sense of the video and sound. So this is just an excerpt. And so this is the kind of video that you'd see, the sound that you might hear. So yeah, this is just a very tiny excerpt. This is three of over 200 video clips that get played randomly across 3 screens. So you get this completely kind of random construction of space, and some of them are look very landscapey, and some of them are very abstracted, and you get sometimes you get like a very top-down view of the record itself. So it's just kind of this graphic kind of interplay, and it's kind of a rumination on what I remember of almost like the CBC vignettes that you'd see in like the early 80s, where there's always the constant sound of a loon playing, the kind of weird kind of awkward tragic modern score or something, and this is the way that at least I was introduced to the notions of what Canada's landscape was. It's kind of at once a bleak but also hopeful and utopian kind of ideal, and especially the way that the record was designed, and even the cover, you can see the kind of swirls on the cover are very sort of CBC aesthetic, and there's kind of this sort of a utopian conceit. This design is meant to sort of speak to all peoples everywhere. Meanwhile, obviously ignoring utterly the Native and First Nations history of the land, and so it's kind of and then at other moments it's actually quite uplifting, and but it really is kind of once you get the idea that this is pictures that accompany sound as opposed to the other way around, then it kind of sort of makes a certain kind of sense. That's it there. So maybe I'll stop.
Wow. Fascinating. That's great. Thank you very much. Wow, that was fantastic. Goodness. Wow. I'm motivated to start making art now. All right.
Well, that's always good.
Yeah, that's great. So what I'd like to do right now is give everybody a couple minutes if you need to run to the washroom or grab a cup of coffee. And when we come back, we have a Q&A with Andrew. All right, there are some questions already in the chat that I'll bring up first when we return. Yes, Russell, I got you. All right, grab a coffee, or maybe it's too late for coffee. Maybe it's time for rum or
how long? 5 minutes or 2 minutes?
A couple minutes. Yeah. You need to run? Go run. Do your thing. Wow. All right. Well, I bet there's a ton of questions brewing in your minds. I'd like to invite you to turn on your cameras if you so desire. If you'd like to ask a question to Andrew using your microphone and camera, I'd like to invite you to use the reactions. Go down to the reactions icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You click on it and you see a bunch of different colored icons. There is one that says at the bottom says raise hand. I'd like you to click that. It looks like this. Okay, and if you click that, I'll acknowledge you, and I'll invite you to proceed to ask your question to Andrew if you wish to speak it out. Okay, all right. Thank you, Andrew. That was fantastic. High five. All right, so we're gonna give everybody a couple minutes, and
didn't realize I was on mute.
Oh, it happens to me all the time. But I think people put me on mute on purpose.
Oh, come on.
Now, let me go and get my coffee.
Whoa. That was very interesting, Andrew. Holy smokes.
Well, thanks very much.
You get around. Holy cow. I mean, it's kind of, you do seem to address both notions that to get really good opportunities to photograph interesting things, you have to travel, right? And then there's the other sort of philosophy that says, well, wait. We here in Canada have a lot of neat stuff to photograph, right? So you sort of balance off, you address both sort of notions. Fascinating.
Yeah, and I do like the idea too that you can just, poke a hole into film and not go anywhere.
Right?
Make interesting images.
How much simpler are you doing it? You're working at your desk,
Yeah.
right? You know, or your workshop or your kitchen table or whatever. So, yeah, which really underlines what I think what people forget sometimes, and that's the idea that we're not only surrounded by things to photograph, but we're completely surrounded by photographic processes that we can take advantage of with just a teeny tiniest little bit of creativity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't need a blad to make great pictures, right? You know, the most important photographic tool is about 6 inches behind the lens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, people forget that.
Where do I buy one of those?
Yeah, exactly. They're in short supply some days, you know.
I need one, I think. All right, excellent. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you got your drinks and you got your pit stops done. Welcome back. We're now getting our Q&A started, and I'm going to start with the questions that were posted in the chat a moment ago. And let's see. The first question here is, or the first comment is by Russell. Hello, Russell. And it was a comment to the story you told us about the lady bringing you the tea with her son, photographed in Canada in front of your dad's office window. And Russell said that's called a propinquity.
Propinquity. Okay.
Propinquity. Right? Tomato,
Okay.
tomato. Those fortuitous cosmic connections. Very cool.
Russell,
I learned a new
you're
word
on
today.
mute still.
Am I? Huh?
No, Russell is on mute.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to say something.
You
Hold
should
on.
be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, he should be.
Yeah, no, it's propinquity. It's an old English word I'm trying
Yeah.
to bring back. And my definition was those fortuitous cosmic connections, sort of beyond serendip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that differ from simple coincidence, Russ?
How you feel when it's over.
There you go. Okay, very cool answer. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Like,
Excellent. All right. Thank you. So the first question here is from Ian Archer, who we met a little bit earlier. And Ian asks, in the China panorama, did you go there with the intent to capture this image, or was it happenstance that you were struck with the idea while there? I would be fascinated to hear the creative process or realization that this was something to capture, and if you visualize the end product.
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, that image, I don't think I really realized what it was until I started looking at it again and later. I shot that in 2014, and to date I've only actually made two big prints of the panels as test proofs, and then I spilt cyanotype fluid over one of them completely, which made it really interesting. It was a proof. It wasn't a problem.
Okay.
But so I thought a lot about, like, did I intend to do it? And I have to say both, like both no and yes. I mean, I didn't go there knowing that that's what I would see there. Like I was there with my family and we were, doing touristy things, but I'm always shooting anyway, especially when I'm traveling. And so I did kind of notice that there was something particularly interesting happening here. And I also like the idea, like, I love it when you find essentially ready-made photographs, because I mean, the architecture of that space, it was just, completely columned off and sectioned off, and the distance, like I had a 40 millimeter lens, like this little pancake lens, which I just absolutely love because it's cheap and crappy, but it's just so
tiny.
It's so tiny and it works so well. And it's not, people don't find it threatening. And I was saying to Celio earlier that in China, like walking around with a camera is the same thing as walking around with glasses. People don't think about other people taking pictures because it's just it's just, I guess it's so ubiquitous. I don't know. So there was like that lens distance. I was sort of sitting on the bench. I'm kind of like looking at this thing, and I'm like, oh. And I go to the next one, sit down. I'm like, so like it really did kind of form as I was there. Like I didn't go with that intent. As I said, I don't really shoot like that. Like to date, this is really the only images that or work that I've really made that pictures of other people. It's just not really necessarily be an interest of mine, and I'm also not necessarily sure I'm not good at it. It's not like I was never trained as a photographer. I didn't do photography. Like when I was at Windsor, because that's where I know Celio from when I was doing grad school in Windsor, I came in as a sculptor, and kind of left as something in between.
Not sculptor.
Photographer. Yeah, it was kind of what was going on. So yeah, so I don't know if that addresses your question. I mean, my creative process is, I don't know. Sometimes I wish I could say it's the same all the time. Like it would make things a lot more comfortable and a lot more reliable, and I could just say, okay, I'm gonna go do that thing now. But it's not the same every time. I think it's just about trying to pay attention, or at least noticing things that interest me.
Call it hippie compass or hippie radar.
Okay. I'll have to grow a longer mustache for that.
Excellent. Well, I can see that Russell has his hand up.
COVID, I can't get a haircut. It's been almost 2 years now. It's crazy.
I hear you. It's all going away from up here, right? It's all moving to the back.
I don't understand this, guys. I don't get it.
I know. And you're like 72. Like, what's going on?
You know, like
all right. Well, I see that Russell has his hand up still. So, Russell, go ahead.
Okay, I got to remember where to start. The stuff you were doing at the end there, you were talking about shooting stuff in your backyard or in your house, literally. I was reminded of the stuff that I loved done by Josef Sudek, the Czech photographer. So there was elements of that. And from that extreme all the way up to the beginning, when I thought the gestalt is strong in this one. That's it.
Oh, that's a nice thing to say for sure. I mean, what I find so incredible about Josef Sudek is that, like, I've been we see his images for years, and there's, like all the window stuff and just the kind of like variations on a theme, but just so varied. But then, like, there was a show of his at the National Gallery a couple of years ago, and he had one arm, like he
carrying these big panoramic cameras like this with negatives like this and tripods.
Like, I mean, the amount of effort and difficulty and labor to just, like, no wonder he shot out his window, but even still, like, he still did other stuff too. Like, I just, like, again, it's that kind of the kind of direct material kind of engagement that is completely
There's 30
other.
shots of the same raincoat, all different.
Yeah.
And they're big time different. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, incredible.
Anyway.
Wonderful. Great. Well, Ian has his hand up. Ian?
Hi, Andrew. Thank you. I must say I'm in awe of the range of creativity and things you do. Like, it's not one theme that gets changed a little bit over a while. I mean, you do completely different things. And this is kind of related to the first question, is that, do you think that there's kind of not chronological, but does one idea kind of morph to the other? You're doing something like the mirrors, and you come out of that and you see something else and you go, oh, okay, I'm going to go over in this direction, and then that leads you way over in the other direction. I'm kind of interested in how, through the process of your creativity and how you've been creating images, is there a pattern to how one goes to the other? Or is it just completely random that all of a sudden, marvelously, in your mind, you go, okay, I can work with this?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I joke that I've always got 17,000 things on the go, and I thought, well, okay, that's obviously an exaggeration. I should sit down and write like all the things that I'm thinking about right now, like, you know, all the ideas that I want to pursue and all the things. And like I 57 ideas of things that I feel like I'm actively doing. I had to stop because it was just like, okay, it's getting just too schizophrenic, or, well, it's not a good use of the word schizophrenic, but anyway. Yeah, it's something that's really pertinent for me right now, actually, because I'm thinking that I need to find a way to focus more, because I feel like I do waste a lot of time, you know, trying to decide what I need to do, what I'd like to do next. But at the same time, it's, you know, it's exciting because, you know, there's always stuff happening. I mean, I think I get easily bored, so I just keep filling things up with new things. I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. But obviously, you have an extremely creative personality in mind, and you must have a family that loves you, that when they're on vacation, they quietly go away and let you take pictures of each little window.
Yeah, that is true. I do have a family that loves me and is very patient with me.
Great. Well, thank you, Ian. Mark, you have your hand up.
Yep. Ian, I was thinking of a couple of quips for a couple of the pictures, like the rock picture. I would say I take it for granted. And then the one of the illegal pictures it's a good quote. To err is human, but to forgive divine.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah,
I do like fun.
Yeah, and then the other thing also, you were showing those that shipping container. Look at those shipping containers out in BC right now. Like there's one that dropped off that ship.
Right, the tanker.
Yeah, and then it landed on the tip of Vancouver Island, off after a native village, and out of it were 14 fridges on the beach as well. So that's an amazing one.
Oh,
wow. And then the latest shipping container was from all the disasters that's happened, and it's right on the beach, right in Vancouver right now. And all those pictures that are happening in the Lower Mainland, they don't look real at all.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a guy's motorcycle in there from Japan, and he got his motorcycle back rebuilt?
Yeah, I think so.
A Harley Davidson.
Yep. Yeah. Oh.
Wow.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting.
All right, we see Russell's hand up again.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, you were wondering about how to slow down and focus and all that stuff. Well, I've been living out here, as a real estate agent put it, in the middle of fucking nowhere. Little 3 acres on a small lake outside of Owen Sound. So
it's not working out.
No place I'd rather be, man. It's like, yeah.
You got to understand, Russ lived right downtown, right off Bathurst.
No, I was hardcore. My business was Young and Gerard, common camera and optical repair.
Right.
Wow.
I lived at Bathurst and Tecumseh and Carlon Dundas in warehouse spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I had hundreds, maybe 1,000 hours of live recorded music I did with a reel-to-reel, and later some other stuff. So
I when just as you were moving up there, I didn't think you'd survive. I was
built. No.
Yeah.
I spent a year in Peace River with a dog in the early 70s. I'm fine.
There you go.
Yeah, that's nice up there. I spent a week up in Southampton last month, and I was just shooting up and down the Highway 21 up to Wyerton. It's
a lot of pagan going on up here, so it suits me. Anyway, you're invited.
All right. I may just take you up on that.
Called Hummingbird Hill. We named it the second week we were here.
Nice.
Huh.
Hummingbirds every year, and this year 6 pairs. So yeah, they're doing well. They all squabble, so that's how.
Do you have a sign out front on the road that says that?
No, hell no.
Okay, because it just got familiar.
No, I did paint my mailbox blue, like Taj Mahal said in one of his early records. Gonna go up country, paint my mailbox blue.
Okay. Huh. Oh, well, Andrew, I do have a question that is both a question and a comment and a recollection from earlier this afternoon. You showed me an interesting photograph that you had treated in a very special way.
So, I mean, I have to laugh because, like, what I showed you is, like, I don't know, maybe 25% of what I've done. Like, there's a lot of other projects. I don't know, Celia, this afternoon we're talking about other stuff, and I ended up showing him a project that I'm still working on, where I'm manipulating photographs by William Notman. So here's a William Notman photograph that I've silvered. I don't know if you can see the photograph from Niagara Falls. And so I'm silvering them, you know, because I'm still interested in silver and silver leaf, and as much as it's kind of like this.
Oh my!
So this is another Notman photograph. So these are actually fiber-based prints from original negatives that I bought at the McCord Museum a few years ago. You used to be able to go in and just buy them out of like in the gift shop for $25. Yeah, they're printed on fiber paper, like directly from the negative. Now you have to, well, you can't get them anymore like this. You can get reproductions, but they're all digital because they've all digitally scanned the negatives, and they just get, you know, give you an inkjet print. So it's not quite the same. But it's one of the kinds of things that I do with like historical processes as well. I've got some. I've made quite a few tin types and ambrotypes as well of. Well, I've got one here actually. I'll show you.
Oh, good. He's wearing pants.
So this is a tin type of the paper towel that was used to prepare this plate. So it kind of looks like a cloud. There's a whole series of images like that where they're just basically cloud images, where again the depictive information is kind of either not much or a lot, but it's not. But it's also referring to itself. Yeah.
And here's the comment. Your work is so meta. I mean, it's photography about photography through photography, using photography, and shown photographically. I mean, there are so many layers. It's kind of like that movie Inception, right? It's really fantastic work.
Or Shrek. It's like Shrek, you know, where Donkey says he's an onion.
There you go. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Right.
But I think the photography chemicals smell better.
That line, I love the smell of fixer in the morning.
So many layers.
I had a question. Those silver cameras, the original ones, when are they going to go on eBay?
The original.
The chromed ones.
Oh, the chrome.
The silver, you said, not chrome.
Silver. Sorry, I heard solar.
Yeah. I mean, we're gadget freaks, right? We're hardware freaks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they come in those mirrored cabinets. So
better.
Yeah, they're. I have sold a couple, but yeah, they're not cheap to make.
No, exactly. Wow.
Yeah, the chrome process is like it's literally like a 27-step process. I've had to build a whole spray booth to do it, and buy some kind of crazy equipment. So yeah.
Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
You use some interesting lenses. You mentioned the 40 mil pancake. What else? Like what else is kind of interesting that's in your lens?
Well, it took me a long time to figure out how to shoot the record, because I needed to get really close to it, but also make it feel like it was really far away. Because I wanted to get sort of that sense of aerial, or I also I want to confound the scale. And so as soon as you're close to something, obviously like your depth of field is like crazy short. So I wanted something that was like had a huge depth of field that could make it look like it wasn't a macro lens. And a friend of mine put me onto this lens made by Laowa, which is a Hong Kong lens startup company. And it just so happened they launched this lens on Kickstarter, and I bought it. It's what's it called? It's a probe lens, but it basically looks like the barrel of a gun. And it's not just a long extension tube. It's got 29 lens elements in it. It's got an LED ring at the end of it, so you can like light up. You can put it into holes and things. It's also waterproof, so you can stick it into like. And in the ad, they stick it into a watermelon and take photographs of the inside of a watermelon. Or they put it in, but it's incredible. It's the Laowa. I don't know. It's like F22. It's a crazy.
But it's relatively tiny, right?
It is tiny. But it's the end of it. Obviously, it goes onto a Canon. Well, any mount that you want. But it kind of like it's got a cone part to it. It goes. It's not this long, and it looks like a gun. It looks like the barrel of a gun. So that's kind of a fun lens.
Cool. If it was flexible, it'd be a rectoscope.
I don't know why it has to be flexible to be that, but whatever.
Ouch. Ouch.
I'm sure someone has done that. I just haven't been to those websites yet.
It must be fun trying to take it through customs.
I actually have one, a Pentax one. The customer worked at one of the hospitals, and they were throwing this out because they had the new whiz-bang version of it. So he gave me this Pentax rectoscope, sterilized, of course, in a sterilized bag. Thank you.
Wow.
Oh, there it is. Oh, Pentax. Wow. So Ian has just shared a link to the lens.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see some people that would be enthusiastic about that lens.
Well, apparently you can get something called an earwax camera.
Yes, you can. I'm looking for one.
Think about that for a second.
Weird. Earwax camera.
An earwax camera. Yeah, I listen to a Hamilton station when I'm driving, 98.3, the Energy 90. I've got to get this right. Boy, they'll hurt me bad. And for a few days that was their running sort of little joke. One of the announcers was talking about an earwax camera. So apparently they exist. I don't know why you would want to be exploring that part of your surface anatomy, but whatever, turns you cranky.
Yeah. It's quite incredible. Like you can put like you the subject that you're shooting, you can be touching the lens.
Right.
Wow.
It's just it's amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it makes for great commercials.
Oh God.
You can go right into a pizza box and right across it.
Wow. Well, Mark has his hand up.
How many flashes did you use for when you were doing Yellowstone?
How many which?
Flashes.
I tried to use just one.
Okay.
Most of the time. I did have two. I didn't get the flash that I really wanted. Vistec in Toronto used to have, they probably still do, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a really hot, like big power flash, and it's got a ring and a central thing, and you have to plug it into two ports of the battery pack or whatever. And I used that when I was shooting at the base of Niagara Falls. I didn't show you any of those. Are on my website. Those images are quite interesting too. And that was crazy because we had to, like, we brought a generator down. I had to hire Niagara Escarpment Police that apparently have special training in, like, whitewater rescue. And they were literally holding me. I wasn't at the edge, like the top of the falls. I was at the sort of on the whitewater walk down in the rapids, because that's where North America's largest standing waves are. And so they were holding me, and then, I'd press the button and the thing would flash, and it was like nuclear winter. It was just like, and then everything would go absolutely dark. And then you get this retinal image, you know, like burn in your eyes for a couple seconds, and then you'd hear the generator starting to power up again, like, and it was just like the waves going by. It was a crazy thing. And then at 11 o'clock, everything stopped because they turned the falls off.
Right.
They just like, they divert, like, I think it's close to 80 or 90% of the water gets diverted to generate power, and they turn the lights off, and the river, the whole river went down by about, I don't know, 12, 15 feet. Wow. And, you know, these massive standing waves that were there like 10 minutes before were still there, but they were just kind of like tame by comparison. It was astonishing. Yeah. Anyway, so I didn't have that flash, but I had just some basic strobe. So I tried to do one because I didn't want to get too much different angles, or I didn't want to have sort of different like a delay in trigger time. But sometimes I used two. I actually brought three, I think, in total. But yeah.
The part where you were taking pictures of and I guess it was Algonquin, where you're in the rowboat and blasting off this strobe. I was sort of picturing you in this rowboat, praying to God that you didn't get any water splashing into the boat.
Yeah, it was a little bit bigger than a rowboat. It was like a 14-foot aluminum, like it did have a motor on it.
Yeah, like a skiff. Yeah.
Just keep dry.
Keep dry.
Yeah, no, I had a, you know, like a power pack, and I was hand holding them, like flash in one hand, and then I, like, when it was done, I would wait till it cooled down and put it in the dry bag, and then we had a raincoat over the battery pack.
Whole works.
Yeah.
And praying that a sudden storm didn't come up, sudden electrical storm.
Yeah.
That would light things up pretty good too, but kind of involuntarily, huh?
We did have a mishap where the driver of the boat thought he knew where he was going, and I was like, "There's not a lot of lights here," like, he said, "Well, just let me know if you see something." And I said, "Okay," and then I'm like, "I see something," and you know, he almost drove us right into like a massive rock, because there's all these shingles and stuff everywhere up there. So it was, it was a bit frightening.
You were talking about big lighting. One of my incarnations, I ended up with a GE warehouse's worth of flash bulbs going back to the 20s to the modern times, including projection bulbs that all went up the kin mount to that guy with all the crazy projectors that he sold.
Yeah.
Anyway, the spelunkers would come by and buy boxes of these things and run strings of them through the caves, and they'd use a 12-volt battery to set them all off with the camera open.
Yeah.
That's how they'd light those big spaces. And the other guys that came by for them, you know that classic story about the guy who used to string flashes along the train tracks as the train went by, could lamp?
Yeah,
They would do the same thing with other concepts. So we got rid of all the flash bulbs. It was great.
That's fun. I mean, I have a friend of mine are doing a project with photographing spent flash bulbs as well. But it's OW Link who did all the train stuff. And, I love that work. I just love also his initials are OWL. Like, that's incredible.
And he was nobody, quote unquote.
Who?
Yeah, but you still, like, you can't I don't know, you can't buy photographs of his like, they're not cheap. Like,
not anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, thanks very much. This was really a real pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. This was a fantastic talk. There's one question here from Ian, just popped up on the chat. On your website, are the cyanotype images on fabric or paper? Where do you find the space to produce one of this size?
Well, I don't know if this will work. But you can see over there's one of the cyanotypes.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Studio. So that's on paper. They're 16 feet long and 5 feet wide.
Wow.
So they're on rolls of Fabiano watercolor paper, which you can buy at certain stores. Like Desserts actually sells those rolls of paper. And I coat them. I coat half at a time. You just roll out half on a big table and then coat them and then roll out the other half. So you don't actually need that much space. Yeah.
Very cool.
I would say that would be capital J, just coat them.
Sorry, say it again. I didn't catch that.
I mean, that's got to be a unique talent. Coating anything that big to do, say anything. That's what I just meant.
Well, I mean, if you coat it a couple of times, I mean, it's like, admittedly, it can get quite challenging, but I'm not being so, anal about it, because I'm dragging them out to the woods and putting full-scale trees on them and then coming back. So I'm not really worried too much about, perfect coatings and stuff.
No, that's not what I was. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
I think that one, I think some dirt from the roots right on it.
Oh, that's cool. But that's legal, right? That sort of is legal.
I think so. Yeah. I don't know.
I think it's fascinating. I think it would be fascinating to see Andrew at one of our live events with a table there and his images and pedestals and cameras and stuff like that.
Happy to come. Happy to come. In fact, Clint, you totally sold me on membership. You can sign me up.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Doesn't he get a freebie for a year for coming on like this?
Yeah.
Like we used
Yes,
to?
it does.
Yahoo.
But yeah. But if he pays us $35, we do it 1 year for free and then 1 year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
heck, I'll even pay you
that's how we hook him in. And we're good at it.
First one was free.
Perfect.
Right, that's the deal.
Good night, gentlemen. This has been a hoot.
Thank you, Russell. Have a wonderful evening.
Nice to meet you,
Everybody
Russell.
keep safe. Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, nice seeing you too, Russ.
I'll look out for Hummingbird Hill next time I'm driving by just south of Owen Sound.
Yeah, look for Lake Charles, Ontario, not Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Wicked. Well, I'd like to thank everyone tonight for coming out, for your questions, for your comments, both here on camera and through the chat. And a special thanks to Andrew for gracing us with such a fantastic, inspiring presentation and taking us through this space where he is exercising his practice. This very interesting, adventurous, not well-defined place where you're going through, from one end of the limitations of photography and technically wise, and then to the other maximum of creativity and dancing between these two extremes so well, so masterfully. Thank you very much, Andrew, for
You're very welcome.
coming out tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Howdy
Good
ho.
presentation.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Okay. Take
Russ.
care. Thanks,
Yeah.
Celia.
I have a question
you, Andrew.
for Clint, if he wants to hang on for a sec.
Yeah, go ahead, mate.
The first one of these I got onto fine. I got an email notice and everything worked fine. But the last 2 or 3 times I get dropped and I had to go rummaging around to get on today. I never did get the email secret code or word or whatever I was supposed to get.
Is that right?
Yeah. Really?
I'm fairly literate.
Yeah,
now,
let me.
but...
Well, this is. I think one other person brought that up, and the website has been undergoing some maintenance, some scheduled maintenance. I did get an email reminder yesterday that the event was going to take place in less than a day. Okay. One of the things you can do is check. Sometimes when you get regular emails from a website like this, sometimes your email client will dump them into the junk folder.
Spam.
No, but the first one came through, and I don't have trouble with these from other sites. So
yeah, that's the only thing. I'm looking into it. I've Mark.
Like, I don't know how I got on tonight. I don't know how I got on tonight.
Russ, did you
pushing buttons on the screen?
Right on.
Oh, I'm glad you made it.
My reminders from Eventbrite.
Right. Sorry? Did you sign up through Eventbrite?
Yeah.
Okay.
Several times.
So yeah, I know you registered twice for this event. I could see that.
Oh,
probably. You never got an email reminding you about the event, and when you open it, you got you say it says join the presentation kind of thing. Yeah. It just seems to flow from one thing to the other.
Right. And you can join either through Eventbrite or through Zoom. They give you that option.
you know.
Really?
I didn't. Okay. So I
hold on,
will follow up on that.
Anyway, that's all. I mean, we'll see what happens next time.
Hold on. Bob may have an idea. Bob was just taking a breath.
Russ, I went in on Eventbrite and it locked me into a full screen view and I could not change it. So I had to kill it and bring up an app and go in that route using Salio's codes. And that's what I'm using right now. It works fine.
Okay, well, I'll keep my fingers crossed.
But as
I'm going to look into it.
Every time
I see
Eventbrite does something, they change things.
And that is something that is really frustrating because Zoom is doing the same thing. Zoom is changing and being updated every few months. And so is Eventbrite. They don't let you know much ahead of time, and you don't really know how you are going to be affected by it. And I see sometimes there's a discrepancy with what people can see and what I can see when I'm running the event, and we don't always have a heads up on that. And I should say we hardly ever have any sort of heads up with some of these changes. I'm very sorry that happened to you. I got your email earlier tonight that you had registered a week ago, but that you didn't get the only thing I can say is have a look at your junk folder. Maybe they got dumped there. Sometimes my
if I knew how to find that.
Spam.
Your spam folder.
And do you have the Zoom app loaded on your desktop or on your whatever you're using?
Yeah, the Zoom gizmo there, the little icon.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to look into it, see if there's anything.
I managed to download that the first time for something else that I do with some other artists.
Oh. Okay, well, I am going to look into it right now. And I
appreciate.
Yeah, if there's anything there, I will let you know. There was another gentleman that was having a lot of trouble signing on to register. And in the end, I registered him manually. So if you're having issues like that, do let me know. I can register you manually.
It was there the first time, and it accepts all the information is true, and then that's as far as it goes. It doesn't say join meeting or anything.
Oh no!
Wow.
So it's like, okay, you wouldn't get an email, so I've checked and checked. Anyway, I'll leave it with you guys. Take care. Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Good to see you,
I
Ross.
was here half an hour late, Celio, so I'd still
Oh,
like
no
to
worries.
get that link.
Yes, you will.
My class got canceled. He couldn't get into Zoom.
Gosh.
Oh no.
Well, you know what? So we got the first half hour recorded for you. We're all still recording, actually. All right, so you'll be able to see that.
I enjoyed the second half hour. Yeah.
And I mean, it's just been fun. It was a fantastic talk, wasn't it?
Great. Yeah, it was great.
Just like bouncing all over the map. That was great.
I know, it was all over the place. I loved it.
I was pleasantly surprised because sometimes if it's so all over the place, it kind of doesn't hang together. But this was it actually went very logically from one facet to another. It worked just fine. I didn't
Well, I think it's the thread that through all the work, right? He's pushing photography, and he's pushing it, and he's allowing the unexpected to come through, and it's just he's having fun with the medium. A lot of us are very serious. We go very with a specific idea in mind and try to realize that idea, and but he's open to these things happening.
I'm over on his website right now, and it's it's great. But
he's like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's not a kid, right? He's producing some like huge
work. Yeah, very unique work.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I had the great pleasure of going to school with him way back in the '90s, back in Windsor. He was doing his master's. I was doing my undergrad.
That far back, the 90s.
It's 95, 96, and he was TA for one of my courses, and we used to play jokes on him because we thought he was very prim and proper, and because I believe he's half British, and great guy, but just he was just made full professor at Ottawa. Which very is
good for him.
Yeah, and he's been all over the place. Like I've been following his career since back in the days, and it's just fantastic. And it's just it's like a real international Canadian contemporary artist. Like he's out representing us in all these festivals and biennales, and he is collected by, you know, the who's who of the, you know, the National Gallery. And that's just fantastic. And I just, you know, I've been talking with him about this for quite some time, and now that he's on sabbatical, he had the time to do the talk. Yeah.
I see.
But we've been chatting for a bit about it. So yeah, it's just really great to have him on. But I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you hadn't seen this presentation and you just randomly came across, you know, an image, and then you saw that other image randomly, and his name was, you wouldn't have thought that it was the same.
Right.
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 Yeah.
Right. No, it's really interesting and it's refreshing, right? Just to, you know, like he works almost so intimately with photography, and yet he doesn't consider himself a photographer.
Right.
But he's probably taken more pictures and gone on precise location trips for the photograph, you know, all over them. Like Baffin Island, I wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
The hell, right?
A bit cold for me, you know. But it's fantastic, and all these places and the things that his eye picks up. It's yeah, it was. I'm very happy that he accepted our invitation and that he presented tonight. And I want to thank you guys for coming out and for having a good time during the presentation.
Yeah,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It was a good one.
You've been pulling so many rabbits out of hats, Salio. This is just wow, quite serious. I mean, it's under like relatively tough circumstances. You know, in the good old days when we were doing this live, you know, you can sort of, you know, razzle dazzle them with the whole, you know, in-person audio visual effect. But, you